Welcome back to the Raw Selection Private Equity Podcast. Back with us today is Andrew Towne, partner at Olympus Pines, a lower to middle market private equity firm. His focus today is for our Playbook series, looking at how to grow your portfolio company. Let's dive in. Andrew, it's a nice big broad topic to kick us off. What do you think it takes for businesses to succeed?
Great question. I think it takes the same things for businesses to succeed that it takes for any high performing team to succeed. And I break that down into four things. First, the team has to agree on its goal. Second, the team has to have the right players in the right spaces. Third, the team has to agree on their plan to achieving their goal, training, equipment, etc. And finally, they have to get the right training, equipment, and incentives actually put in place. Why don't I take a second and elaborate a little bit what I mean by each of those four? When I think about aligning on the goal, I think in private equity that involves strategy, financial planning, stakeholder alignment. Strategic research is important to make sure that you don't embark on a stupid or impossible journey. Financial planning enables your budgeting, your KPI setting, your stakeholder alignment. You have to make sure that your investors, lenders, employees' expectations will be met if you achieve your plan. And then getting everybody aligned with stakeholders involves making sure that everybody agrees on that goal before you start spending a bunch of time and money. When I look at catastrophic failures in private equity, in business, in teams in general, it often has to do with the fact that people thought that they were going to row a boat in two different directions. And if you can't even agree on what direction you're going to go, how the heck are you going to reach the top of the mountain or the destination in a boat? When I think about building the right team in private equity, for me, two of the most important tools for building teams can be something as simple as I call them cascading role charters and a RACI chart. To design your current and your future organization. And what you're doing with those two tools is making sure that at each level, all of the work required of a person on top is getting done by the people below them. So these role charters call them almost like one-page simplified job descriptions where you just break down what tasks and KPIs are each individual on a team responsible for. And then by cascading them down from the person above, you're making sure that, for example, if the CFO has a job jar with 100 jobs, you have to make sure that the 10 people under the CFO are covering those 100 jobs. And I'm always shocked how common it is for businesses to not have 10 or 20 jobs even written into somebody's job description. So people look around and say, why didn't that get done? And the answer is you didn't actually align the organization with the role charters to make sure that every job had an owner at home. And then RACI, it's a common chart, stands for responsible, accountable, what's the C? Collaborating and influencing. It's basically a decision-making hierarchy of making sure that for any important decision, somebody is assigned as the accountable person for making that decision. Somebody is assigned as being consulted. They're required to be consulted about an important decision. They're required to be informed about a decision, et cetera. And that way you make sure that, for example, in the budgeting process, you don't have a stovepipe where somebody in an operating role is making a decision that impacts another division, and that division was never consulted or had an opportunity to weigh in on it. So anyway, those are two powerful tools for bringing the right team together. But it's equally important to attract strong performers and team members to your team, right? If I like to use analogies of rowing and mountaineering, and in mountaineering, if you're going to climb a big mountain, you want to make sure that you've picked strong people who have complementary skills. You want a couple people with medical backgrounds in case there's emergency. You want a couple of people who are really strong on technical stuff in case they need to be the first ones to go up technical pitches. Same thing in business and private equity. You have to make sure that once you have your role charters, your job descriptions all mapped out, that you're filling those roles with people who really spike in things. And I believe that the best way to attract strong talent is to be super clear in what you're looking for so that people can self-select into the role because they can tell that you're not wasting their time and they can tell that it'll be a good fit. And it'll be easier for you because they'll screen themselves and you don't have to waste a lot of time filtering for them. So what does that mean? Anything from making sure that you list requirements in terms of skills, location, cultural expectations around the hours, the work ethic, legal expectations, benefits, including pay, cash, non-cash, ancillary benefits, insurance, discounts, travel, what kind of leave policies you have, what kind of training opportunities will they have, recommendations, referrals, positive culture, etc. All of these things, the more transparent you're able to be as a job creator, the higher talent I think you can attract. And then if there's a misalignment and you end up there's a bad fit between an employer and a person, uh, there's less risk of sort of fault on the employer's perspective because they've charted everything out to the best of their ability. And then finally, in terms of compensation, I think it's really important to use benchmarks and know that for a certain role you're offering a competitive wage, and let people know number one what that wage is up front, so that you're not in a weird negotiation where people feel slighted at the end of an interview process. But number two, uh, be confident that you're offering a strong compensation for the role so that if somebody comes back and demands more, you've already done your benchmarks and you can say, I believe that what we're offering is competitive. And I believe that there will be 5 other people who will be interested in this role at this compensation if it's not a good fit for you. Uh, another thing, one other thing that's important for building a strong performing team and attracting these players is running a tight evaluation pipeline. I can't tell you how often high potential candidates get turned off by not hearing back from you for many days or weeks or not knowing whether their interview process will continue. So as an employer, what we try to do is just be transparent, set a fixed timeline in the job description of the goal is to have this decision made within 6 weeks or 2 months. The goal is to do all the interviews within a 2-week period, whatever. And then you can communicate that to prospective employers, recruiters, job boards, personal networks, and just run the pipeline timeframe, which ultimately gives you more information to make a good decision on the timeline that you need, while enabling you to share that concretely with the job seekers. So that's it. So that's for attracting strong performers. One other thing I'll mention is once you get them in the door, you gotta part of having a high performing team is keeping high performing players. So 3 things that I think contribute to talent retention are delivering what you promised in the job, especially related to giving feedback, giving training, promoting people as you laid out in the job expectations, and then paying people according to what you said. And for example, nothing will lead companies to lose talent more than promising bonuses in a range of X and then giving everybody the bottom of the range, right? Like if it's going to be a range, then like people expect to be somewhere in the range and you should be able to defend how their annual bonuses worked out. Next, communication on development is crucial and you have to be transparent both with high performers and underperformers. When performance improvement plans and constructive feedback to help employees develop and thrive in their roles, when they don't work, you have to act on that. And unfortunately, that sometimes means agreeing with an employee that a separation from the company is best because it's better for that employee to know that they were given feedback and had the opportunity to correct before there was a termination. It's also better for the company because it reinforces a culture of we do know what we're trying to do. We do need players who are contributing to the game. And if the contribution isn't working for some reason, then action does need to be taken in order to get to the top of the mountain or reach your rowing destination. And finally, managers beware if you are not also constantly seeking upward feedback. Very common mistake is you're only worried what your boss thinks. What the people around you think is often more important because they're the ones whose feedback can help you improve in ways that actually enable you to build the team around you instead of just making sure that the person above you is delighted. Okay, that was a lot on how I think people can attract and retain talent. But next, if you like, I can talk a little bit about like what do I mean when I say planning and aligning on a path toward a goal. Would that be helpful, Alex?
Yeah, it would. I just want to dive a little bit into the kind of topics you've laid out there. Obviously, talent's a big thing from my perspective, and I can't speak highly enough about getting good people. And a lot of problems I think in private equity is a lot of investors don't know what good looks like, and how exceptional people are pictured, whether it be from a chief exec, CFO, within a certain market, certain space, certain capability. And we only, you know, I'm a big believer that when change happens in a business, it has to be for a positive, of course. But, I see if you lose your top performers, your opportunities you can find your next top performer in whatever it is. How do you guys, you mentioned obviously about understanding the role and building that right team. How have you previously gone about kind of understanding what is what does good, better, best, what does the best talent look like for each opportunity? Obviously, as you invest in different platforms, different industries, different sectors, etc.
Yeah. Um, I try to look at prospective employees through the lens of this is an oversimplification, but sort of hard skills and soft skills, or maybe tangible and intangible might be a better way to put it. Uh, Tangible things are pretty straightforward. And usually I can see them on a resume and then I can conduct a technical interview to double check and make sure that people were not embellishing their resume. So y- finance skills, right? If the role requires somebody who can build a financial model, you're looking for a resume that says, "I've built many financial models for X types of business transactions." And the technical interview is walk me through an example of one of your technical models, or even build one on the spot if you and the candidate have the time for them to do a 1 or 2 hour exercise. So those would be hard skills, right? Or an accountant or a lawyer, right? If you know you need a member of the bar, then you're hiring a lawyer and you can quickly check their expertise, whether it's transactional or something else. Um, Soft skills, this is something that BCG taught me. BCG is a place that uh, probably skews heavily into a person's ability to learn because the company as a consulting firm challenges its employees to walk into totally foreign situations so frequently that one of the success factors that's most important for them is the ability to just figure stuff out and just jump into the deep end with any given problem. And I've carried that with me in the private equity in the sense that if a person if the role doesn't have a ton of required hard skills like legal analysis or financial analysis, then the soft skills become that much more important. Or sometimes the soft skills can even outweigh the importance of the hard skills. And those are things like ability to learn, ability to structure and plan on how they will solve a problem. Uh, Evidence that a person is a self-starter and uses good judgment about when they're going to ask for help versus how far they're confident carrying the ball down the field before they start looking around for a pass. And I've found some of my favorite people to work with are the people who don't necessarily have any relevant background in the job that they're performing, but who bring a fresh perspective and just wanna roll up their sleeves and get into something and figure it out. And especially, for newer, younger private equity companies that are closer to the entrepreneurial end of the spectrum, that's extremely valuable for, uh, helping build a plane while you fly it.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Well, so you were going to mention kind of what's next? You've built your team. You've got the alignment with regards to the vision, the goal for the business. What else is next up for?
Yeah, yeah, 2 last things out of those the original 4 things that I think it takes for a business to succeed. That's you have to align on the path, and then you have to get the right training equipment and incentives. So, aligning on the path is, I use what I call roadmaps to plan on the path toward achieving the goal. And, a saying that I kind of like is nobody ever accidentally climbed Mount Everest. You can see Mount Everest from hundreds of miles away, but getting the top requires choosing a route, getting the equipment in place, having the team, and then actually beginning to walk up the route that you've chosen for yourself. So applying that analogy to business, every executive team member ought to build a roadmap toward their annual or even multi-year goal. And each roadmap for an executive, in my opinion, should break down and have 2 or 3 sub goals. Then you should take those sub goals and break those down into 3 to 6 milestones that are measurable, binary. You can ask yourself, has this goal been achieved or not? And then finally, they need to be evenly spaced over a time period so that over the course of a year, every few weeks, you've got something concrete where the answer is yes, you achieved this sub goal, or no, you didn't. And the value of building a roadmap like this is, um, I always say it almost doesn't matter what deadline you set for yourself. The important part is that you set a deadline because time has this mysterious way of just flowing faster than anybody ever thinks. And so you peg a goal for a year from now and you peg a sub goal for 3 months from now. Man, if you turn the corner tomorrow and those 3 months are up, and you bet that will certainly help an individual and a team motivate themselves to get there. Also important are making sure that you map out interdependencies between executive roadmaps. Because, for example, if the chief operating officer of a portfolio company has to do something that requires financial support, well, that CFO better be negotiating with the bank to get the COO a loan to expand the production capabilities of the factory or something in time for the COO to increase output. And if the COO misses their goal and it's because there wasn't a bank loan in place, that type of interdependency is crucial to anticipate in advance so that the CFO and the COO are working toward the goal together. Because of that, all of the executives have to review each other's roadmaps and agree and commit to those interdependencies. And then finally, it takes analytical time to make sure that they're all consistent. And essentially, think of it like Beethoven composing a symphony. He writes what the bassoon is going to play, and he writes what the trumpet's going to play. You got to make sure that the bassoon and the trumpet are actually lining up and are actually going to get to the beautiful music together. Finally, once you have these roadmaps on a regular basis, weekly, biweekly, you need to have a full team meeting where you're holding everybody accountable together. You're softly, making sure that people are hitting their deadlines. And when they're not, that you're designing solutions or interventions that get people back on track. Um, so that's sort of how I recommend our portcos think about road mapping. And finally, making sure that teams have the right training, equipment, incentives. This is pretty intuitive. People need clear roles. They need clear and efficient processes for collaboration. They need to be trained in ways to perform their roles. Some companies can do that internally. Sometimes you have to give them access to external training. People need equipment, right? You need PP&E for hazardous job, third-party data access, et cetera. The number of you never want an employee to say, I couldn't do anything for a month because you never gave me a subscription to this software that is necessary for my job. And then finally, incentives have to be aligned to both individual success toward their role charter and also company and team success to make sure that people are intrinsically motivated to help one another and to value full company success. If I had to choose between weighting incentives more toward company success or more toward individual success, I would always weight it more towards company success. But a little bit of all of them is important so that people don't completely leave their job duties aside, but also don't completely ignore the full company and the full team benefits.
Thank you for explaining so clearly there. Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick mention of our long-standing partnership with Grata. As you will probably know, the private equity scene is constantly evolving. And deal flow is moving now to proprietary and data-driven processes. Grata provides you with the data and information of over 7 million private companies. So if you're looking to improve your proprietary deal flow and improve the data access, then reach out to Grata today. Now back to the podcast. With regards to the clear roles, clear processes, training schedules, etc. How are you building that? Is that just classic old school kind of spreadsheet, Word documents to build all that together? Is there a bigger plan or something more fancy that comes into
Yeah,
play, or is it literally as simple as that?
does not have to be sexy. What's important is the thought that goes into it, not the format or the technology used. And so Word is fine. For role charters, everybody gets one page of a Word document. Half a page is even better, or a single PowerPoint slide, 20 bullets. That's all it takes. The magic is aligning between executives so that the CEO's obligations to shareholders are fully covered with the executive team. And then below that, doing the next layer down so that all of the members of the C-suite, all of their functions are being covered adequately. And then, that RACI chart for responsibility and accountability, that I like to build in Excel just because it looks like a grid where all of the employees are listed in the rows, and then all of the different things that need to be done are in the columns, and you can put RAC or I in each of the cells to sort of clearly, basically, you're just building a massive matrix of who owns what important processes within the company.
Interesting. So, next kind of big topic. What's your approach with regards to finding and closing deals?
Sure. Uh, when I think about finding deals, I think about running a top-down filter, picking an industry, building a target list, and then just getting out there. When I think about closing deals, I think about aligning on expectations earlier, similar to attracting and retaining talent, and then building trust. Um, Sounds simple, but I think it is simple. So going to finding, I think that most goals are achievable if you're willing to do the work. And an analogy I like to use is the game of darts. I think that if a person is willing to take careful aim with the dart and throw it with precision, and if they're willing to do that enough times, inevitably they're going to end up with a decent number of bullseyes. So if you're willing to throw 100 darts and do the work, you're going to get 3 bullseyes. And I think people only remember the bullseyes when they step back at the end of a night of playing darts. So finding deals, I think it's similar. If you're willing to do the work of scrubbing enough industries and prospective targets, eventually you'll find the right target in the right industry with the right motivated seller to get a great deal done. So picking an industry, you probably want to set some threshold for basic attractiveness, growing, fragmented market, decent margins, something that will fit with a competitive advantage for you and your company's background. And then you need to ask if it's a good fit for you and your team in terms of your interests, your skills, your networks, your capital position, your timeline with investor returns, et cetera. So once you picked an industry, then you just have to build a list of potential acquisition targets. Y- 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 You know, I think it's important for private equity companies to build their own list with their own research. A lot of companies rely a lot on broker support to send inbound leads, but nothing beats having command of the industry yourself and being able to ask those who support you in finding acquisition targets. So, like, these are companies that I want to go after in rural Idaho, for example. The companies that are available to sale are often easy to spot. The companies that might be available to sell or to buy are the ones that you build your list and then you go after them. So once you have this list, just a ton of cold calling and introductory meetings. And in my opinion, it's important to treat every meeting as if it might be the only deal you do. So I recommend people be kind, be humble, live up to the words that they're speaking to a person, demonstrate some knowledge of the business and industry and why you're cold calling somebody. And finally, be transparent about who you are, what you're hoping to do, and why the business owner might benefit from working with you. I think some people I've seen a lot of people take the tack of beating around the bush or not really disclosing up front what they're trying to do, and maybe they have success with that, but I would if I were a business trying to sell itself, I would find that disempowering, and I would just want somebody to cut to the chase and just level with me pretty quickly, and then if there's a conversation to be had, we'll have the conversation. Um, and then I think in private equity, people focus a lot on acquisition. Uh, it's important to also ask yourself, could you create this type of business on your own? Because if you think you could just create it for yourself from the ground up, then you don't need to worry about paying an acquisition price and finding a willing seller. One of my good friends was considering buying a services business. And right before he closed an acquisition, he realized that he wasn't actually paying for much, and it would be easier for him just to recruit a team and invest a small amount of capital to get his own service company built. And 3 years later, he's now the biggest in his market, and he's very glad that he started a company rather than trying to buy a company. So those are the ways that I think private equity companies can find great deals. For closing deals, I think it comes down to align on key terms early in your term sheet. Work hard to meet expectations, whether that's timelines or anything else during and after diligence. And then constantly build trust with clear communication and establishing a track record that you're the kind of person who lives up to their words. It's great to sell, but don't be the guy or gal who is all sizzle and no steak.
Absolutely. When you are looking at deals in industries and sectors, what prevents you from kind of going after shiny object syndrome? Oh, AI's just popped off. HVAC services is really busy. Technology prior was the big investment, and now obviously businesses predominantly can't, or private equity firms can't afford the leverage, so it's now growth equity because it's minority stakes. What for you prevents you from chasing the next, hopefully fast growth industry and making that investment in that space as opposed to sticking to your nitty that's been referred to previously?
Uh, I told my cousin's young son once, don't be the coolest guy in high school. And I shared this advice with him. I said, if you're the coolest guy in high school, you want to make sure that the rest of your life, you're not looking back and saying that high school was the coolest, best year of your life. And I was not cool in high school. I was the opposite of cool. And I'm sharing that story with you because cool things when I was young has made it easy for me to not get caught up in the cool things ever since then. So, and maybe that just makes me a natural contrarian. Shiny objects are great, but I think people need to go into a bubble, right? Turn off your phone, get out a piece of paper and a pencil, and truly identify what you yourself are looking for as a private equity company for your acquisitions. And once you've written down your 5 or 10 things, you know what I mean? Like you have to start with what's right for you. And only then can you go out into the forest and start looking at shiny trees like AI or health roll up or whatever else. And I think if you've charted your own North Star for your company first, you'll have a much easier time avoiding things that are not a good fit with your North Star, even if they're shiny to other people. And also, you'll have a better time, an easier time recognizing something that's dead north aligned with your compass. Um, and I think probably a lot of private equity professionals would agree that the deals that strike me are the ones that you've never heard of, but you look at it and you say, wow, this is fragmented. This has a moderate barrier to entry. This fits with my skills and background. In other words, it's something that I could take over and run well. And you're like, and then all of a sudden, the fact that it's not shiny is the final point of conviction where you're like, oh my God, this is it. I got to do this before it becomes shiny. Did that answer your
Right.
question? But don't be cool in high school, because being cool in high school means, in America at least, maybe you were already on the football team or whatever the cool activity was, and then maybe you go through your entire life looking for what's the cool thing at any given age. But I was never cool.
No, it makes two of us, unfortunately for us, or fortunately for us both in that. That's right. Yes. So, talk to us about the increase of revenue and your focus around that with your portfolio and how your kind of playbook looks on that small and simple topic.
Sure, sure. So you built your team, you have found your deals, you closed your deals. Now you've got to make them better, for their own sake and for your investors' sake and for your stakeholders' sake. So let's talk first about the top line. I think six things can. I, I look for six things for improving top line. First, optimizing a company's product mix. Second, segmenting customers. Third, fixing pricing. Fourth, attracting and retaining the right customers. Fifth, making sure that you're actually collecting the revenue that's owed to you. And finally, managing your working capital depending on the industry. In terms of bottom line, which if you're interested, we could talk about next, you can focus on direct costs, distribution costs, operating costs, et cetera. But let's go back to the top line. So product optimization, pretty simple. Shift your product offerings toward those that yield higher margins or higher gross sales. I've been fascinated to read headlines about the transformation that Starbucks is going through right now. And I'm not close to Starbucks or have any idea what their actual transformation plan is. But I suspect in simplifying their menu, one of the reasons that they may have done that is to reduce the labor that goes into each of the product that they're selling, which is one of the ways to boost margin. A simpler menu is easier to execute. Hopefully, part of that menu simplification is also like the ones that they can charge more for and whose ingredients cost less. And that ultimately is a product optimization that hopefully improves their top line. Next one, make sure that you're segmenting your customers for each product that you're offering. The best way to do this is thinking about either value-based pricing or competitive pricing rather than cost-based pricing. So you want to make sure that you're identifying your most profitable customer types and the products that they're buying, and then segmenting your pricing to meet those customers' willingness to pay. So, um, let's say you're in an industry where you have a similar product but four different tiers. Your most wealthy consumers might be able to afford much more than you thought, but then your least wealthy consumers, you might actually be able to attract many more of them with a slight price reduction. And so understanding each of those segments and their willingness to pay will allow you to break out your product offerings to maximize your margins with what the wealthy consumers are willing to pay while maximizing the volume of the less wealthy consumers or that they're buying your products. Um, Third is attracting and retaining customers. This comes into everything from marketing. What message are you sending over what channel? Discounts and bundling, building long-term value. For example, shifting your product offering as much as you can towards recurring revenue and building customer loyalty where possible, as opposed to living in a world where everything is completely one-off transactions. The fourth thing I mentioned was um, collecting your revenue. And when I think about that, I think about optimizing the rate at which you're offering refunds in your industry and then improving your billing and collections practice so that the number of portfolio companies I've seen that are just leaving money on the table because they're not collecting what is owed to them. That's a classic quick win. And finally, working capital management. If your business is capital intensive, it's shocking how much of a spread you can make by collecting faster what's owed to you and paying even a tiny bit slower what's owed out the door. And so, for example, if you can collect on 30-day terms, but pay on 60-day terms, what that means is that like the balance of the payables and receivables for 30 extra days, that money's sitting in your bank account or even in some kind of money market account. And like, if it's a capital intensive business, that can add up to millions of dollars very quickly. So those are a variety of levers that I try to pull on revenue optimization right off the bat. Questions on that, or should we talk a little bit about costs?
Not only am I the host of the Private Equity Podcast, I'm also the founder and managing partner of Raw Selection. Raw Selection's an executive search firm working exclusively within the private equity industry, supporting the portfolio companies and the private equity firms with securing exceptional talent with our motto of de-risking executive search. Well, I was going to ask, so how much do you look for? So when we reference this back to the team, obviously there's a very good understanding as to the levers that you pull in order to increase revenue. Do you look for that playbook already in your executives when you're looking to bring them in, say a chief executive, or is this something that you're putting in as a private equity firm into those executives, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the company and the thesis for value creation. If you're investing in a growth company, then the thesis for value creation might be to help them hit the gas and do exactly what they're doing faster, right? In which case, you might not be looking at these levers so much as just giving them a capital infusion and riding the lightning. If your investment thesis involves significant transformation, then your term sheet hopefully reflected some of your high level ideas for how you would increase value. But during diligence, some of the things you're going to look for are confirmation that you will be able to pull some of these levers as hard as you think you can pull them. So, and this is intuitive. Some of these things like pricing are outwardly visible. You can approach almost any business and quickly get a sense of, do you think their price is high relative to their competitors or not? But other things like how quickly they collect receivables, you have no clue. And that one you might not even be able to find out during even a deep diligence. That one you might just have to own the company and then start working the problem. But your question was, are you recruiting talent with this in mind? And I would say the answer is yes. If you know that your investment thesis requires a transformation, then hopefully you are hiring a chief transformation officer as part of that acquisition. Or if you know that that you're going to hit growth with a company by segmenting customer and changing your pricing strategy, then like maybe you're actually hiring a C-suite executive. Maybe you're making sure that your growth leader, your chief commercial officer, has a background in that type of customer segmentation and revenue. Just like on the operations side, if you're building a tech company, you want to make sure that you have somebody who's really good at building software. Totally different than building an oil and gas company, right?
Absolutely. And you referenced at the start the reduction cost basis, something private equity firms are renowned for. We're talking about all the other kind of main financial levers, but when we come down to what people would receive as financial engineering, but what are you doing from that basis and not just cutting staff? I hope.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think a lot of private equity companies gravitate toward cost early because cost is definite. It's cost is there today, and if you can reduce the cost, then it immediately impacts the P&L. Whereas revenue, you can change pricing, but like not every industry will a pricing change hit the bottom line tomorrow. Retail sales, like if you increase the price of a cup of coffee 10 cents, you'll feel it tomorrow, but not every industry is like that. So for cost cutting, there are many things beyond organizational cost cutting that we like to focus on, and one of them is direct cost. That's improving your business's efficacy at procurement. Are you good at negotiating discounts, right? And Yeah, I mean, the way to do that, in my opinion, is to make sure that from a process perspective, you are always rebidding your work, because if you're rebidding your work, I'm confident that the market will often answer the question for you, because some competitor is always going to be eager to offer you a discount to try and bump the incumbent that you're paying for something. But that also means that you have to be actually willing to switch if a competitor gives you a 25% discount. But when you start talking about like software platforms that your entire company is using, like switching is not easy, right? So being nimble enough to actually pursue a big discount when you get one is also involved in improving your procurement function. But that's your direct cost. Next, you can optimize your distribution costs, right? So you need to analyze the margins and the volume that you're achieving through each channel that you're moving your product through, and and try to negotiate better rates as well there. Third type of cost that I like to focus on is non-organizational operating costs, heavily industry dependent, but it can involve anything from process optimization to energy cost, real estate, service cost optimization. Uh, we're reading headlines in the United States that data centers fueling the AI boom are locating close to energy centers, and in some cases, data centers are negotiating direct contracts with energy producers to just plug directly into a utility power plant. That's an example of those are massive operating cost synergies that they're achieving. They have nothing to do with organizations. So, does private equity sometimes get a bad rap for headcount reduction? It does. And I think that's unfortunate, because there are many ways that you can improve profitability while also retaining your team by giving them raises.
Of that. I think that's certainly impressive.
And actually, the final thing is when it comes to org costs, uh, there's a lot to be said about repositioning and retooling an organization and slowing the rate of hiring by increasing and clarifying the expectations of the existing team, right? So you walk into an organization, one private equity company might say 50% headcount reduction. A different private equity company might say 50% retooling, reskilling with no hiring for the next year, because we've got great players on the team. Now we just have to help the team meet our future goals without having to hire different people. And I think that's overlooked. But like, if you believe in people and you invest in them and you give them an attractive future, I find that often people are excited by the opportunity to learn new things, especially if the alternative would be a headcount reduction and then hiring somebody new with a different skill set.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, it's quite the cover of growing, scaling, developing a business, and I appreciate your insight, Andrew, and taking the time today to jump back into the Private Equity podcast for the second time. So thank you very much.
Really a pleasure chatting with you today, Alex.
And as always, thank you very much for everybody for yet again tuning in to the Private Equity podcast. Please do subscribe, and you'll get notified of the podcast that comes out every single week. But till the next time, keep smashing it, and thank you very much for listening.